We've been working through the story of Joseph from Genesis. An amazing story of the divine and the human interacting in quite a remarkable way for God to achieve his purposes through people like us, and often through people who are behaving badly as well. In chapter 41, which we looked at last week of Genesis, a famine is approaching. It's approaching like an apocalypse. It is looming like a storm cloud, only there's no rain in it, of course. And in chapter 42, it hits. And for those of us who are not familiar with famines, which is probably most of us, I think, read this chapter glibly and quickly. The horror of famines was one of the great horrors of the ancient world. It caused people to ultimately act inhumanely as hunger just overtook them and thirst. And this particular famine that is mentioned in Genesis, there's a few actually mentioned in Genesis, but this one is the most devastating. It is described in a number of ways and in a number of times by the narrator of the story, to such an extent that it reveals the cataclysmic nature of famine, and of this famine in particular. As we read through the book of Genesis, we find that Egypt would become so dry, so impoverished, so poor because of the lack of the rain, that people would begin to sell their livestock, their very livelihoods. They would sell their land. They would sell their own family members. And they would sell themselves into slavery in order not to starve. That's in chapter 47. So this is as bad as it gets. That kind of social disintegration that happens when people run out of food and water. Devastating. And it's remarkable because Egypt, if you remember the geography of Egypt, is a land that has a lot of rivers. It has a river system through it. Now the Nile River and all its tributaries spreading out, it was always a land that was well irrigated and so on. And so the question is, if this is as bad as it gets in Egypt, which is irrigated, how bad is it in Canaan, in the Promised Land, where there are no real rivers for irrigation to speak of? Even more devastating. And so we pick up the image in chapter 42 of verse 1 of a famine that is devastating in Egypt, but even more so in other parts of the world. Genesis 42, verse 1 to 5. When Jacob, way back, remember he's the dad, way back in Canaan, learned that there was grain in Egypt because Joseph had been doing his work for those 7 years of plenty, storing grain. He said to his sons, Why? Why do you just keep looking at each other? He continued, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die. Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others, because he was afraid that harm might come to them. And so remember that Joseph and Benjamin were the only two sons of Rachel, who Jacob just loved beyond rationality. And so Israel's sons, Jacob's sons, went among those who went to buy grain, for there was a famine in the land of Canaan also. I guess the closest we can come in our experience perhaps to a large-scale, possibly life-threatening, life-disrupting global event would be the COVID pandemic. It doesn't come close to this at all, of course. And yet as we heard and read the stuff on the blogosphere around people's reactions to COVID, it was interesting to me to read so many stories of people who had going steadily in one direction in life, and suddenly COVID hits, and there's an enormous reevaluation. And they suddenly take a U-turn. Some of them lead to divorce, others lead to reconciliation, for others it led to buying a property, for others it led to changing careers. And it does seem to me that these life events that are big tests in living, often lead to tests in our hearts as well. And this famine is no exception. And we see through three main groups of characters, three tests, three changes that God calls people to make in the story. The first one is Joseph, and his is the struggle towards unconditional forgiveness. So let's pick up the story again, verse 6. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold grain to all its people. And so when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. But he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he asked. "From the land of Canaan," they replied, "to buy food." Although Joseph recognized the brothers, they did not recognize him. Probably no surprises there. He probably looked very much like an Egyptian, shaved head, makeup on. He did, he spoke in Egyptian to them. So there's probably no surprises they didn't recognise him, alongside the fact that it was now 20 years since he had seen them last, a long time, that he recognises them. And how does he speak to them? He speaks to them harshly, angrily. He accuses them of being spies. And you can't, find that too hard to believe, I guess, because the last time that he's seen them, they'd been all about killing him, hadn't they? And they came back from the brink of killing him and decided to throw him in a pit instead, and then human traffic him to a bunch of traders for some silver as the traders were going to Egypt. He had sat there in the pit, crying out, begging them to save his life, while they sat up on top eating dinner. Can you think of a more morally bankrupt scene than that? Help, please get me out of this pit. Don't kill me, don't send me. And they said, hand me another piece of chicken. A few metres away. Right? That was the abiding memory that Joseph had of his brothers. The very last time they were together, as they sold them for silver. And you've got to wonder, in the years from that moment, 13 of which he spent in prison or as a slave, staring up at the cold ceiling of his cold dungeon, going through that scene again and again and again, what must have been going on in his heart? What must have been going on through his thoughts, right? He must surely have been saying, if I meet those brothers again, I'm so gonna get there. Because that's what we do, right? Man, I wish I could say that thing to that person who hurt me. I wish I could go back and just say that really witty, cutting remark. Because that's how we work. But we find that after a while, Joseph, in fact, turns his back mentally on his family. He turns his back on that moment in time when he remembers his dreams and all that happened out. He lashes out, and this scene with the brothers, he lashes out at them, seems to God that. "You're spies, you've come to see where our land is unprotected." "No, my lord," they answered. "Your servants have come to buy food. We are all the sons of one man. Your servants are honest men, not spies." "No," he says to them, "you've come to see where our land is unprotected." But they replied, "Your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man. who lives in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more. No more. Great news for his life. But suddenly he hears about Benjamin, the youngest here, his only full half-brother, the other son of his mother Rachel. And he hears he's alive. He's the only safe person really in his family that he ever had. And suddenly at least one member of his family becomes important to him. And he longs to see him. And so he begins to manipulate the situation. Verse 15. And this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison, so that your words may be tested to see if you are telling the truth. If you are not, then as surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies. And he put them all in custody for 3 days. I could imagine he'd probably put them in the jail that he was housed in, just as a little bit of spitefulness going on. A lot of commentators think that Joseph in the situation acted wisely, appropriately, measuredly. I don't know. I do not have. I think Joseph is emotional, messy, and only just holding it together. He's being ambushed by a surprising turn of events, and suddenly all of his hurt and all of his pain come rushing back to him as he stares at his brother's faces, and he isn't equipped to handle it in that moment. And who set up the ambush here? Wasn't it God who set up this ambush? Think about it. We are told that all of the world is streaming into Egypt, desperate to buy food. There must have been thousands of people from all over many countries streaming into the city in order to buy food. If you want financial assistance and you go to your local lending office, would you expect to see Christopher Luxon instead of you? You would not. You would be dealing with a minor official. And yet, strangely, in this moment, Joseph comes face to face and brought face to face with one of the thousands of people coming through, and it's his brothers. Is God in this or what? Why? And I think it's because there was unfinished business between Joseph and his brothers. Right? Joseph had turned his back on them. He named his firstborn son Manasseh. Do you know what Manasseh means? Forget. And it says explicitly, I named him forget because I am forgetting my family. That's what it says. And yet God ambushes him because forgiveness is part of God's priority for you. God is challenging Joseph to soften. To not harm. To start walking that route of forgiveness for people who have crazily hurt him, terribly hurt. And forgiveness is messy, right? Want to hear an amen for that? Forgiveness is difficult, messy. It is grit your teeth and do it stuff, right? Especially on this level of hurt. When your family of origin is so dysfunctional, they try to kill you. But God has ambushed you. And He wants to ambush us. Because He does not want us to stay in places of unforgiveness. And He calls us to soften and to start walking that road that leads to grace. We find that road is being walked by Joseph. 3 days later, he comes to his brothers in jail. And he says, okay, look, I'm softening things here. Instead of all of you staying in prison, one of you going back home, one of you stay in prison, the others can go. There's a step along the right road here. But it's a long road. But I love what he says there. I do this for I fear God. We forgive others not because the other person is right, not because they acted justly, they did not. Not because they did not speak harshly, they probably did. We forgive because we fear God. And this is what he calls us to. Just last week in the Herald, there was a story of Leo Schofield. This guy here. A man who had been wrongfully imprisoned for 36 years for killing his wife. He was released on parole in 2023. Get this. His release in 2023 was 8 years after someone else came and confessed to the murder. 8 years. The actual person who killed his wife was named Jeremy Smith. He'd been so worked on that he said, I have to confess this crime. And so he confessed his crime. And the article says Leo Schofield put in the work of forgiveness while he was in prison. He turned to his faith. He mentored younger inmates. He became someone who mattered to others on the inside. But it wasn't until recently, nearly a year since he'd been paroled, after decades of maintaining his innocence, that Schofield was able to feel a sense of completion after he and Jeremy Scott, the murderer, spoke on the phone for the first time. And Schofield says this beautiful phrase, forgiveness is not about the person who hurts us. It's about us who are hurt and being freed from the effect of that. That captures for me what another guy, Lewis Smead, says. To forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that the prisoner is you. It reminds me of another famous quote from another famous person. Forgive others from your heart, says Jesus. Forgiveness is messy, hard, difficult work. God calls us to it anyway. There's a test. Will you rise to that test? On the flip side, another test for another group of people, the anguish of unconfessed sins, the brothers. They said to one another, surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life. But we would not listen. That's why this distress has come on us. Reuben's replied, didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood. They did not realize that Joseph could understand them, since he was using an interpreter. Isn't it interesting? So he turned away from them and began to weep. But then came back and spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes, and the other brothers were separate. Interesting for the sake. Remember, this is 20 years after Joseph has been thrown into the pit and then sold. Why standing in this room before this Egyptian man who has nothing to do with Joseph, they believe, suddenly cause these brothers to go back in their heads to a moment 20 years earlier when they betrayed their brother Joseph? Was it because, I don't know, maybe they were standing in Egypt and the traders were going to Egypt? Maybe there was a connection there? Maybe. But I think also it was It was because they were sensing history was repeating here. 20 years ago, the brothers had been sent out on a trip by their father, and then they had journeyed back home without one of their brothers. Here, they'd been sent out by their father. They journeyed back home without one of their brothers. They faced the prospect of telling their dad, I've lost another son. And the Lord just takes them back. And then the twist goes deeper. Because what does Joseph do? What does Joseph do? Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to put each man's silver back in his sack, and to give them provisions for their journey. After this was done for them, they loaded their grain on their donkeys and left. At the place where they stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to get feed for his donkey. And he stored his silver in the mouth of his sack. My silver has been returned, he said to his brothers. Here it is in my sack. Now what had happened 20 years ago? They had returned home to their dad, minus the brother, with what in their sacks? Silver. The slave trader's price for Joseph's life was silver. And the brothers give it. How do they react? Their hearts sank. And they turned to each other trembling and said, what is this that God has done to us? Oh, cautious. What was God doing to them? He was bringing them face to face with the anguish of unconfessed sin. He was reminding them they could try to ignore their sin as much as they like, but God would. He was challenging them, I think, to face up to what they'd done in their past and finally come home. So, are there things in your past that you've been turning your back on for years, but you just can't get it out of your mind? And God is saying, this needs to be fixed. You need to talk to that person. Make it right. Going back to the end of the story of Leo Schofield was wrongly accused and wrongfully imprisoned. He was amazed by the confession of this man, Jeremy Scott. He said, if Scott hadn't confessed, I'd still be languishing right now. Doing what Jeremy has done is not been mental. It took a lot of courage. It took a lot of personal integrity. And it always does, doesn't it? Take a lot of courage. I've done it a few times. Many of you, most of you probably have done it as well. All of you at different levels. It's never easy. But it shows integrity. And it shows courage. And the anguish of unconfessed sin will not be addressed in any other way. That's how God's made us. Is there someone in your life you need to go and talk to? And the third test, I think, in this story, which I am warned, I feel a lot of caution about this one, is Jacob. The defeat of unrelenting despair. Jacob, the father, the old man, is waiting back home, surrounded by fields that have become deserts through the famine, waiting for this lifeline from Egypt. And his remaining sons finally come home and they describe their conversation with this strange governor of Egypt that they met. The man who was Lord over the land said to us, "This is how I will know whether you are honest men Leave one of your brothers here with me. Take food for your starving household and go. But bring your youngest brother to me, so I will know that you are not spies, but honest men. Then I will give your brother back to you, and you can trade in the land. As they were emptying their sacks, there in each man's sack was his pouch of silver. When they and their father saw the money pouches, they were frightened. Their father Jacob said to them, "You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is now no more. And now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me. Oh, woe is me." How would you feel if you were... no. Go back 20 years here, to the moment when he learns of the loss of Joseph, way back in chapter 37. And what he says there is this: I will continue to mourn, until I join my son in the grave. This was not a fleeting decision. This set the course of his life from that moment on. And he says to his sons here in verse 38, Jacob says, "My son Benjamin will not go down to Egypt with you. His brother Joseph is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you are taking, you will bring my grey head down to the grave in sorrow." Forget about poor Simeon back in Egypt. He's only concerned about Benjamin, because Benjamin is the new Joseph. You know? And he's nursed his grief, indulged in it for 20 years, made Benjamin the substitute, and he's become bitter. Remember what Jacob used to be like, though? He was like a superhero. Man, he was incredible. He was the opportunist who would strategize to steal his brother's birthright. Remember that? He was the guy who would connive to increase his wealth from his father-in-law. Remember that? He was the guy who had a wrestling match on the banks of a river in the pit of darkness against God and won. Remember that? Man, this guy is awesome. You right? He was the bloke who God gave amazing promises to, incredible visions and dreams and pictures and words. He was the guy who always believed that things were going to get better just around the corner, it seems. And now we see him as an old man, defeated, bitter, unrelenting despair. He's lost his hope. He's lost his faith. He's lost his joy. And this happens to us as well. Just a while ago, I was hearing of an old guy who has been championing the gospel of Christ for years. Somebody saying, "No, God's not doing what I want." Catching it up. It takes courage, it takes grit, I think, to hold on to hope sometimes. You don't follow God all your life as a whip. It doesn't work that way. You have to have incredible determination to not fix your eyes on this, but to fix your eyes on Jesus. When your kids don't follow the Lord, when you get divorced, when your business is ruined by a competitor or someone you trust in, to still fix your eyes on Jesus and not become hardened and have hope and have joy and have faith. When life is doing everything to rob that from you, that takes courage. But what we find in the New Testament, rejoice always. Again I will say, rejoice. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, patient in prayer. Right? Don't give up. Stay hopeful. Don't become a Jacob. Stay faithful. Stay loving. So, I just want to lay these three tests before you and myself this morning. Oh, there's so much here. Oh, so much here. From the story of Joseph, man, we see so much. Is God prompting you to forgive someone? To let a prisoner free and find out that the prisoner is yourself? Is God prompting you to seek forgiveness from someone? To take that courageous step of saying, hey, can I have a coffee? And let's talk on the phone. Is God challenging you with despair, prompting you to hold on to Him? Let's close our eyes and I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do some business with God around those questions.